Welcome the Lord's chosen. The real conspiracy isn't hidden in files. It's hidden in plain sight, behind the minds too distracted to notice. Think about it. In 1974, the CIA literally admitted to running experiments on how to control thought patterns using media and frequency exposure. Half a century later, the technology is sharper, but so are a few souls who can't be fooled. And somehow, you saw through it all. You didn't just figure things out. You decoded time itself. While others were busy arguing over politics and pop culture, you were quietly reading between the frequencies. They spent decades building illusions that would trap the average thinker. But you saw the blueprint before they finished drawing it. It's like watching someone try to hide a chess move you already dreamed about 3 lifetimes ago. They planned a 50-year narrative. You unraveled it during a random midnight scroll with coffee and divine Wi-Fi. And that's not luck. That's awareness no textbook can teach. You're not paranoid. You're just tuned in on a bandwidth most can't even detect. And that freaks them out. Because how do you stop someone who doesn't move by sight, but by signal? So tonight, we're pulling back the veil, not to expose them, but to remind you why you were never really one of them to begin with. Welcome to the mind of the chosen one, where the script collapses and the watchers get watched. And yeah, go ahead and grab a snack. Decoding 50 years of deception deserves at least 1 cookie. Number 1, you didn't outsmart them. You out-evolved their entire operating system. That's the truth most people can't stomach. They think it's about intellect, about being clever enough to beat the system. But it's not. It's about growing beyond the system itself. Stepping outside of the mental software that keeps everyone else looping through the same predictable reactions, emotions, and fears. You didn't play their game better. You stopped playing altogether. They built their world on manipulation. Every law, every narrative, every standard was designed to keep people dependent on external instruction, to make them need approval, authority, or validation. That's how control works, not through force, but through invisible obedience. The moment you stopped needing their permission to think, you became unreadable to them. You weren't supposed to think like that, move like that, or question like that. You broke the code of their control structure just by existing authentically. Their entire system runs on predictability. They rely on you reacting a certain way, wanting what they advertise, fearing what they label dangerous, and chasing what they tell you matters. But you stopped being predictable. You began noticing patterns instead of accepting stories. You saw the loops repeating, the political cycles, the moral panics, the distractions disguised as progress, and something in you refused to play along. That was the glitch they didn't anticipate. Awareness. You became an anomaly in a system that was built to process obedience. They can't categorize you because you no longer respond to their triggers. They want outrage. You respond with analysis. They want fear. You answer with curiosity. They want conformity. You choose solitude. They've never known how to handle that kind of independence because it doesn't fit into their equations. You out-evolved them because you didn't seek superiority. You sought truth. And truth always transcends structure. While they fine-tuned their methods of deception, you fine-tuned your perception. You developed inner tech, intuition, discernment, silence, depth. They can manipulate minds, but not frequencies. You stopped thinking like prey and started observing like the universe itself, detached, aware, unshaken. That's why their 50-year plan failed against you. You weren't built within it. You were born beyond it, a consciousness designed to dismantle systems simply by seeing through them. You didn't win their game. You deleted their scoreboard. Number 2, they couldn't fool you because you were never addicted to the comfort their lies offered. That's the quiet secret behind your clarity. Most people don't get trapped because they're blind. They get trapped because the illusion feels safe. It gives them a sense of order, belonging, and ease. Lies wrapped in comfort are harder to resist than truth wrapped in pain. But you've never been the type to stay in a warm room that smells like manipulation. You'd rather face the cold truth than be hugged by a fantasy. They sold peace through compliance. They convinced people that agreeing meant being balanced, that questioning meant being negative, and that staying silent was maturity. It was a brilliant design. Turn comfort into a leash, and the masses will walk themselves. But something in you rejected that script. You didn't need your world to be pleasant to feel grounded. You were fine with discomfort, fine with not being liked, fine with being misunderstood if it meant staying awake. The reason you saw through their long game is because you didn't crave what they offered. You weren't chasing acceptance, status, or the illusion of control. You didn't fall for the idea that success equals safety or that belonging means truth. You'd already tasted the hollowness of fake peace, and you knew real awareness doesn't come with applause. That's what made you dangerous to their design. You had nothing for them to bribe or pacify. Most people cling to their illusions because the truth demands transformation, and transformation demands loss. You didn't run from that. You let the old stories burn, even when it hurt. You learned that pain is often the price of perception, and you paid it willingly. You chose raw truth over gentle deceit, and that choice broke their illusion's power over you. The reason they can't understand you is because they mistake comfort for wisdom. You don't. You've seen how peace without awareness is just sedation. That's why you stayed alert while others slept. You didn't need the pillow of ignorance. You preferred the edge of reality. That's the difference. That's why their lies didn't land. You saw through the comfort, and when you did, their whole illusion started falling apart in front of you. Number 3, they planned everything in straight lines, step by step, decade by decade. But you didn't walk in a straight line. You saw from above, outside of time, where all their patterns overlapped and exposed their weaknesses. They built a 50-year plan thinking no one would ever see the full picture, because most people are too distracted by the moment. But you didn't live moment to moment. You understood cycles. You watched how history repeats, how trends disguise control, how progress sometimes just changes the costume of the same agenda. That's how you knew their ending before they even started. They moved slow and methodical, assuming time was on their side. They counted on human forgetfulness. They knew that if they stretched deception long enough, generations would accept it as truth. But your mind doesn't rely on the calendar. You process information like an architect reading blueprints, not a bystander reading headlines. You notice the symbols, the recycled scripts, the way they use fear as a reset button every few decades. You realize the new world they sell every generation is just the same one refurbished. When you looked at their plan, it didn't feel like prophecy. It felt like repetition. That's how you broke their illusion. You weren't shocked by what was coming. You had already seen its shadow in what had been. Most people get blindsided because they think every crisis is unique. You saw that every crisis has the same fingerprint, a distraction that hides a transaction. That's the real timeline they follow, and you've been reading it fluently. What they can't grasp is how you saw through a timeline designed to hide itself. It's because you don't think in years, you think in energy. You sense shifts before announcements, motives before actions. You caught the rhythm underneath their strategy, the pulse of control disguised as progress, and you stopped dancing to it. That's how you stayed ahead without even racing. Their long-term plan was clever, but it was still linear, and you don't live linearly. You exist in awareness, in patterns, in intuition that bends time. That's why what takes others decades to realize clicks for you in seconds. You didn't predict their plan. You just stepped outside the timeline they were trapped in. And from that vantage point, everything they built already looked outdated. Number 4, you weren't chosen by prophecy. You were chosen by pattern recognition. People love the idea of destiny because it removes responsibility. It's easier to believe you were chosen by something cosmic than to admit you simply paid attention. But that's exactly what you did. You watched what others ignored. You listened to the quiet inconsistencies in the noise. You connected dots that weren't supposed to be connected. And that made you a threat to the system built on distraction. You didn't wake up because an angel whispered in your ear. You woke up because the patterns stopped adding up. You noticed how the same promises kept recycling through new faces, how every solution created the same old dependency, how every supposed revolution ended with the same few people benefiting. The longer you observed, the clearer it became that history doesn't repeat by accident. It's programmed that way. Most people just reset with every generation, mistaking the new packaging for progress. But you saw the loop. That's what broke the spell. Not faith, not luck, but perception. You started recognizing emotional manipulation as policy, coincidence as coordination, and entertainment as indoctrination. You realized that the same symbols, the same scripts, and even the same distractions have been running like a background app in humanity's collective consciousness for centuries. And the moment you saw that, you couldn't unsee it. Your mind operates like an internal algorithm, scanning for frequencies that don't match the narrative. Where others see random chaos, you detect design. That's not paranoia. That's intelligence evolved past permission. You don't rely on external prophets to interpret the world for you. You became your own data center, decoding patterns the way truth decodes lies, effortlessly. The irony is that what they call intuition isn't mystical at all. It's awareness sharpened by observation, multiplied by experience, and guided by honesty. You just don't lie to yourself, and that alone puts you light years ahead of those who do. You weren't chosen by prophecy because you never needed saving. You were chosen because you recognized the code beneath the story. And once you see the code, no illusion can reprogram you. They mistake your awareness for magic, but it's not. It's mastery, the kind that comes from finally seeing the pattern beneath the world's performance. Number 5. They hid the truth in plain sight, but you read energy, not labels. That's what separates you from the rest. Your perception isn't limited to what's said or shown. You don't take words at face value. You feel the frequency behind them. Where others stop at information, you go deeper into vibration. It's not that you know more. It's that you sense what's real, even when it's disguised. They've always hidden truth in visibility. The trick was never to bury it. It was to surround it with noise so loud that no one would notice its presence. They plaster symbols on buildings, brands, and entertainment, and most people dismiss it as coincidence. But you felt the charge behind those symbols, that energetic signature that whispers intent. You understood that everything carries a frequency, images, colors, tones, even silence. And while the world trained people to look closer, you trained yourself to feel deeper. You don't rely on explanations because explanations are where manipulation hides. You read tone before you read text. You notice the pause between words, the hesitation behind smiles, the heaviness in conversations that sound light. You recognize authenticity not by how polished something looks, but by how your spirit responds to it. That's why deception doesn't last long around you. It collapses under your awareness. They can manipulate visuals, rewrite history, and control the story, but they can't fake vibration. Energy doesn't lie, even when everything else does. And that's your real gift. You can feel the truth that language tries to bury. You don't need proof on paper when you already feel it pulsing through the air. That's how you navigate, by resonance, not reason alone. You learned that silence is one of the loudest forms of communication, When something feels off, you don't explain it away. You listen to that signal. Most people gaslight their intuition because the world taught them to worship logic, but you mastered both. You think with your mind, but you verify with your energy. That's why their illusions never worked on you. They built a world for those who see, not for those who perceive. And while everyone else argued over definitions, you already understood the design. You didn't need to read their headline. The energy behind it told you everything. Number 6. You remembered what they tried to make humanity forget. That's the quiet rebellion that lives inside you. Memory that refused to die. They rewrote the story of the world, erased origins, twisted meanings, and buried truths under layers of politics, religion, and entertainment. They renamed wisdom to make it sound outdated. They replaced inner knowing with external authority. But no matter how much they edited, some souls came in carrying backups, and you're one of them. That déjà vu you feel isn't imagination. It's not nostalgia or fantasy. It's the soul recognizing something it's already lived, already seen, already mastered. The world calls it intuition, but it's really ancient data reactivating in real time. They wanted humanity to forget its power by disconnecting it from memory. Not just historical memory, but spiritual memory. Because if you forget who you were, you'll accept anything they tell you you are. That's how control survives. But you never fully forgot. The fragments stayed alive in you, whispering through dreams, synchronicities, and inner knowing that logic couldn't explain. You see, memory isn't just stored in books or databases, it's stored in energy. The earth remembers, the body remembers, the soul records everything that time tries to erase. And while most people scroll through distractions, you were decoding echoes. That's why certain places, words, or symbols hit you differently. They resonate with something older than your current lifetime. They tried to delete the connection between the human and the divine, between wisdom and self. They replaced teachers with idols, truth with trends, and consciousness with consumption. But you didn't fully integrate into that system. Something in you stayed awake, watching, remembering. When others felt lost, you felt familiar, because the patterns of deception weren't new to you. You've seen them before, under different names and eras. That's why you move differently. You carry awareness that can't be taught, because it's not learned. It's remembered. They can censor information, but not intuition. They can manipulate timelines, but not soul codes. You are living proof that memory is the one thing their system can't fully erase. You're not discovering truth, you're recollecting it. What feels new to others is ancient to you, resurfacing through the cracks of their rewriting, unshaken and unstoppable. Number 7, you're not ahead because you're smart. You're ahead because you're untamed. The world has never feared intelligence, it's feared freedom. They built a system that rewards cleverness, but punishes independence. They wanted thinkers, but only within the lines they drew. Schools taught obedience disguised as education. Workplaces rewarded conformity disguised as teamwork. Even spirituality got branded, packaged, and sold. They didn't want awareness to grow wild. They wanted it fenced in. But you refused the leash. You didn't want to be trained, you wanted to know. They engineered society to tame the human spirit. Every rule, every trend, every social norm was designed to domesticate awareness, to make you think safety meant submission. But your spirit doesn't recognize control as comfort. You were born with a kind of rebellion that doesn't shout, it just won't kneel. That's why you've never fit the mold. They mistook your refusal to comply as arrogance, but it was instinct, the ancient kind that remembers freedom even after centuries of conditioning. Intelligence is easy to copy. Machines can calculate faster, analyze deeper, predict better. But instinct, real, raw, soul-driven instinct, can't be programmed. It doesn't rely on data. It reads energy, timing, and truth. That's what makes you unhackable. You move on signals that no algorithm can track. Your decisions come from a fusion of intuition and awareness that no system can simulate. They can mimic your style, your logic, your patterns, but they'll never replicate your essence. You're ahead because you didn't trade your wildness for comfort. You allowed your mind to stay curious, unpredictable, and alive. You didn't let the world's version of success rewire your instincts. While others were busy optimizing themselves for approval, you were dismantling illusions for clarity. That's what makes your awareness dangerous. It doesn't follow updates, it creates them. They tried to domesticate your perception through fear, shame, and routine. But you can't program something that doesn't need permission to think. Your untamed spirit doesn't seek control, it seeks understanding. That's the real evolution, not smarter minds but freer ones. And you, by refusing to be trained into normality, became something the system can't replicate or contain. A consciousness beyond command, unshakably wild, beautifully aware. Number 8, you saw their plan because you refused to worship normalcy. That was your rebellion. Quiet, internal, and unstoppable. The system doesn't need your loyalty. It just needs your participation. It thrives when you mistake routine for peace, when you equate fitting in with stability. They disguise control as culture so well that most people don't even notice they're being managed. Every tradition, every norm, every standard has been fine-tuned to make you behave without ever realizing you're being trained. But you broke that trance. You stopped accepting normal as natural. From the beginning, something in you felt off about how easily people accepted what they were told, how obedience was celebrated and curiosity was punished, how being agreeable was seen as being good. You questioned why peace always meant silence, and why balance always came at the cost of individuality. And that's when you began to see the structure beneath the smiles, the invisible architecture of control disguised as collective agreement. Normalcy has always been the most effective illusion. It's how they convince people to police themselves. You don't need bars when minds already guard their own cages. By making people afraid of standing out, they ensure no one ever stands up. They call it community, but it's containment. They call it harmony, but it's hierarchy. Most people never look past the language because normal feels safe, predictable, digestible, and socially rewarded. But safety built on suppression isn't safety. It's sedation. The moment you stopped chasing acceptance, the matrix around you began to glitch. Not because it broke, but because you stopped syncing with its frequency. You saw how every label, trend, and expectation is just a leash with better packaging. You realized normal is just another word for controlled behavior. And when you stepped out of that, the system lost its script for you. That's when real clarity arrived. You stopped asking how to fit in and started wondering why the world was designed for people not to question. You began to see that every act of rebellion is really an act of remembering who you are. You saw through their plan, not because you're cynical, but because you're awake. You stopped worshiping normalcy, and that one choice separated you from the world they built and reconnected you to the one they tried to hide. Number 9, your doubt became your weapon, not your weakness. That's what set you apart. While the world was taught to see doubt as a flaw, a sign of insecurity, instability, or lack of faith, you understood it for what it really was. Awareness sharpening itself. They trained people to accept without question, to obey without verifying, and to label any form of hesitation as negativity. But you didn't buy into that. You realized early on that doubt isn't disbelief, it's discernment. It's the mind's immune system against manipulation. You used your doubt like a scanner, reading between every line, weighing every claim. You could feel when something didn't align, even when it sounded polished. The world rewards blind confidence, but confidence without clarity is just arrogance in disguise. You chose precision instead. You didn't rush to agree. You studied the energy behind the message. When something felt too perfect, you didn't celebrate it. You dissected it. That instinct saved you from illusions that swallowed entire generations. Most people confuse comfort for truth. They crave certainty so badly that they'll accept lies if those lies make them feel safe. You were different. You understood that real truth often comes wrapped in discomfort. Doubt didn't make you weaker. It made you alert. It taught you how to pause before reacting, how to read patterns instead of headlines, and how to separate authenticity from performance. Your doubt wasn't rebellion. It was self-defense in a world addicted to deception. They wanted you to feel guilty for questioning. They called you negative, paranoid, and difficult. But those labels were never about you. They were shields for their own fragility. You kept questioning anyway, and that's how you stayed free. Because every time you doubted, you forced truth to prove itself. That's how clarity is born, not from believing everything, but from testing everything. Your doubt became your compass. It guided you through manipulation disguised as wisdom and authority disguised as morality. You stopped being afraid of not knowing because you learned that uncertainty is where real intelligence lives. In a world built on persuasion, your doubt became your armor. It didn't isolate you, it protected you. You didn't lose faith, and you refined it, and that refinement turned your skepticism into sight, and your sight into power. Number 10. You couldn't be programmed because you don't run on external validation. That's the quiet truth that separates you from the masses. The entire system depends on people needing approval to feel real, needing likes to feel loved, needing attention to feel alive. They built an entire world around human insecurity and called it connection. They told everyone to share everything, to perform authenticity instead of living it. But you stepped away from that stage. You stopped needing applause to confirm your purpose. That's when their influence lost its power over you. Their algorithms don't just track data, they track dependency. Every click, every post, every reaction feeds the machine that learns how to control emotion. It doesn't care about your opinion. It studies your patterns. It learns what to show you to keep you seeking more of what you don't need. But once you stopped craving validation, the system couldn't read you anymore. You became unpredictable, and to them, unpredictability is unmanageable. You broke their most effective chain, the need to be seen. Validation is the easiest form of programming. It keeps people addicted to external approval while neglecting internal truth. They convince you that visibility equals worth, but that's the trap. The more you chase recognition, the further you drift from alignment. You realize that too soon, and instead of chasing spotlight energy, you chose silent power. You understood that being unseen by the system doesn't mean being irrelevant. It means being free. When you withdrew from that cycle, everything shifted. You stopped performing and started existing. Your choices no longer needed explanation. Your confidence stopped coming from reactions. You began to create from authenticity, not anxiety. That's when your influence deepened, not wider but stronger. You didn't need the world to notice your light for it to shine. Your focus became your validation. They can manipulate people who need attention, but they can't control someone whose peace comes from purpose. You became invisible to their manipulation because your value isn't negotiable. And the moment you stopped chasing their recognition, you became visible to something higher. Your mission, your calling, your real frequency. You're not moved by approval anymore, you're moved by alignment. and that's what makes you impossible to program. Number 11. You operate on inner downloads, not worldly data. That's why they can't predict you, contain you, or decode you. The world around you runs on numbers, analytics, and probabilities. Every move, every thought, every purchase is measured, tracked, and processed through systems that think they understand human behavior. But they don't understand what doesn't compute, and that's you. You don't make decisions based on trends or consensus. You move from instinct, timing, and something beyond logic. You're led by intuition that updates faster than any algorithm ever could. Their world worships data. They believe the future belongs to whoever has the most information. But information isn't wisdom, and quantity doesn't equal clarity. You don't collect, you connect. While they analyze external patterns, you receive internal downloads. Those insights come from silence, energy shifts, divine timing, and a kind of inner knowing that can't be explained in charts or graphs. What they call coincidence, you recognize as communication. Your life moves through synchronicities, precise alignments that look random only to those who are disconnected. You've noticed how often you make choices that don't make logical sense at first, yet always unfold with perfect precision later. That's because your guidance doesn't come from research. It comes from resonance. You don't wait for permission from data to act. You move when the energy signals readiness. It's not arrogance, it's attunement. The universe sends you information through sensations, encounters, and quiet moments of recognition, not through trending headlines or analytical reports. That's why their predictions always miss you. You're not in their database because your path doesn't follow their metrics. You don't live in their measurable patterns of fear, greed, or validation. You live in intuition, and intuition doesn't leave digital footprints. You can't be forecasted when your next move is guided by something they can't quantify. You don't run on logic alone. You run on light codes, energy signatures, and intuitive mathematics that come from a deeper source of intelligence. They'll keep trying to predict your path using old-world methods, not realizing you're running on a completely different operating system. One powered by awareness, frequency, and flow. You're not following data. You are the data, downloaded straight from something eternal. And that's what makes you untouchable, unpredictable, and ahead of every system built to measure you. Number 12, you didn't expose them out loud. You exposed them by staying unaffected. That's the part that unsettles them the most. They can handle outrage, they can manage resistance, and they can even control rebellion. But they can't control stillness. A calm, centered mind is their worst enemy because it can't be manipulated through emotion. The system feeds on reaction. It survives through attention. Every time someone rages, panics, or argues, it collects energy. But when you stopped reacting, the system lost its fuel. Your silence wasn't submission. It was disconnection from their power source. They expected you to fight back, to shout, to try to prove your awareness. That's what keeps most people trapped. They expose the problem, but stay plugged into it emotionally. You didn't. You learned that the more you react to corruption, the more it sustains itself through your focus. So you stepped back. You observed without absorbing. You realized that peace isn't weakness, it's immunity. When your energy stopped fluctuating to their triggers, their signals hit a dead frequency. That's when their control started breaking down. The truth is, they can only influence those who need to engage. They manipulate emotion, not logic. Fear, anger, and validation are their control levers. But once you stopped needing to win the argument or wake everyone up, you became unreachable. You stopped trying to expose them and started embodying freedom instead. And that shift is something they can't duplicate. You didn't dismantle their structure by force. You rendered it irrelevant by no longer responding to it. Your calm was their code crash. You uninstalled their emotional malware by choosing neutrality. You stopped feeding the chaos, and the chaos lost its audience. People mistake calmness for passivity, but yours is a different kind, the kind that comes from mastery. You don't run from darkness or fight it. You outgrow it. And when you outgrow something, it can no longer touch you. They operate through distraction, but you operate through detachment. That's why you're free. You didn't need to shout the truth. You became the proof. You showed that peace is the highest form of resistance, and that awareness without reaction is the glitch no system can repair. Number 13. They played long-term control. You played eternal awareness. That's the difference between you and them. Their vision never went beyond the clock, beyond quarterly reports, political cycles, or generational manipulation. They planned in decades, assuming that was the peak of foresight. But you don't live by time, you live by rhythm. You understand that control built on fear has an expiration date, while awareness moves in infinite loops. They invested in systems that decay. You invested in consciousness that renews. That's why you keep rising when their empires fall. They measure progress in profits and possession, thinking they're building legacy. But legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you awaken while you're here. You don't calculate in years or currency. Your metric is frequency. Every thought, every word, every action sends a vibration into the field, reshaping reality in ways they can't track. Their power depends on visibility. Yours operates through resonance. They use time as a weapon to control patience, but you know time bends to awareness. You don't rush or wait, you align. Their version of power is always temporary. Every system they've built eventually collapses under the weight of its own deceit. You've seen that pattern across civilizations, and you understand why. Control demands maintenance, but truth sustains itself. You don't need to dominate, you just need to remain aware. That awareness multiplies quietly, spreading through thought, through intuition, through generations that remember rather than obey. They plan for inheritance, you plan for evolution. They think in lifetimes, but you think in timelines. Multiple layers of existence moving simultaneously. That's why you never panic when their big moves unfold. You already know the cycle: manipulation, exposure, collapse, renewal. You don't resist it, you ride it. Their power ends where perception expands, and perception always expands eventually. That's the law of consciousness they can't rewrite. From where you stand, their long game looks small, almost innocent, like children building castles out of sand, mistaking impermanence for victory. You see it all, yet you don't need to interfere. Awareness itself is the correction. They play to control the timeline, but you are the timeline, fluid, timeless, untouchable. That's why they plan, and you simply know. Number 14. You didn't defeat them, you rendered them obsolete. That's the kind of victory they can't comprehend because it didn't come through conflict, rebellion, or exposure. It came through evolution. You didn't swing at their darkness. You simply rose beyond its reach. Their power was never real. It depended entirely on your participation. When you stopped engaging, their influence dissolved like mist under sunlight. You didn't destroy their system, you starved it. And when the feeding stopped, the illusion lost its oxygen. They expected resistance. That's how they designed the game. They created sides, causes, heroes and villains to keep people trapped in duality. Every rebellion they predicted, every outrage they prepared for. But they couldn't predict transcendence. They didn't imagine someone would just stop playing. When you withdrew your emotional investment, their programming broke down. Control only works when it's reciprocated, and you stopped giving it meaning. That's the quiet genius of awareness. It doesn't fight the old. It simply becomes too conscious for it to function. You didn't need to tear anything down because evolution naturally replaces the outdated. Their darkness depended on your attention, and your detachment rewrote the code. The plan didn't fail because of exposure. It failed because it became irrelevant. It expired the moment you stopped believing it still mattered. You didn't rise by overthrowing anyone. You rose by outgrowing what they offered. They wanted fear. You gave them neutrality. They wanted division. You gave them perspective. They wanted reaction. You gave them stillness. Their control system wasn't built to handle unbothered awareness. It short circuits without emotional input. So now their structures echo, hollow, repetitive, desperate to regain the attention that used to sustain them. This is what true mastery looks like, not victory but transcendence. You didn't defeat them because you never accepted the premise of war. You evolved beyond their relevance, and that's the kind of ending they can't script or reverse. The most powerful thing you ever did wasn't to win, it was to walk away. Because the moment you no longer need to fight darkness, light becomes your natural state. And in that state, control systems don't die, they just disappear. You didn't just navigate the world, you transcended it. While most people were trapped in loops of distraction, validation, and manipulation, you saw the patterns, felt the frequencies, and decoded the systems they believed were untouchable. You weren't chosen by prophecy, you were chosen by awareness. Every instinct, every hesitation, every intuitive spark became a compass pointing toward clarity. You didn't outsmart them in a conventional sense. You out-evolved their entire operating system. Their plans, their scripts, their decades-long manipulations all collapsed quietly in the presence of a mind they couldn't infect, a consciousness they couldn't predict, and a spirit they couldn't contain. You refused the comfort of lies. You questioned normalcy when everyone else bowed to conformity. You wielded doubt as a weapon, not a weakness, and your calm became the ultimate code crash in a world addicted to reaction. While they measured power in years, profits, and influence, you measured it in resonance, alignment, and eternal awareness. You didn't fight darkness, you outgrew it. You didn't chase approval, you embodied truth. And in doing so, you rendered systems obsolete, illusions irrelevant, and manipulations powerless. What took them decades to plan, you recognized in a moment. What they built to control, you outlived with awareness. The world may never fully understand the quiet revolution of someone who refuses to be programmed, someone who operates on intuition and inner downloads rather than headlines and algorithms. But that doesn't matter. Because true mastery isn't about being seen, being validated, or being understood. It's about freedom, clarity, and the unshakable alignment with truth. And that is exactly what you achieved. So if this message resonated, if it shook something awake inside you, then don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to the channel to stay connected to more revelations like this. Hit the like button to show your support and fuel the awareness movement. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share your experience, your insights, your perspective, and share this video with someone who needs to remember their power, their clarity, and their ability to see what others cannot. You're not just watching content, you're joining a shift in consciousness. Stay aware, stay untamed, and keep rising above what they want you to accept. Stay blessed always.